Councilmember Silva, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
You'll be live in the room, so as of before, just make sure you mute and unmute your phone if necessary. I will remind the mayor of the roll call vote necessity.
Thank you.
Kirby.
Good
Thank you.
evening.
Your mic is hot right now.
It's very hot, yes.
Yes.
All right, as we get into our positions. It started. Good evening, Vacaville. This is the June 25th, 2024, 5:30 p.m. Special closed session meeting before our regular scheduled meeting. Do I have a roll call?
Councilmember Stockton?
Here.
Ritchie?
Here.
Silva?
Here.
Roberts?
Here.
Wiley? Here. Vice Mayor Ritchie?
Here.
Mayor Carley?
Here. I'm going to open closed session up with a public comment. Seeing no one, I will close it. We will adjourn into closed session, and there will be nothing to report out, and we will be back for our regularly scheduled meeting that will begin at 6 p.m.
say hopscotch.
Good evening, Vacaville. This is the regularly scheduled City of Vacaville City Council meeting, June 25th, 2024 at 6 p.m. Have a roll call.
Council Agency Authority Member Stockton. Here. Silva.
Here.
Roberts. Here. Wiley. Here. Vice Mayor Vice Chair Ritchie. Here. Mayor Chair Carly.
Here. And as the audience can see, that we have Councilmember Silva is remote tonight, so we will be doing roll calls. And with that, if you are able, please stand for a moment of silence. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. City Manager, do we have any changes for the agenda tonight, which I do believe we do?
Yes, we do, Mr. Mayor, and this is in regards to, because of a potential time crunch with regards to your schedule, sir, we're going to make some changes to get through some of the absolute have-tos on our agenda tonight. So with that, I'm proposing that we take the order after consent and business from the floor in the following order. You can see it here. We'll start off with item 8C, followed by, which is the battery storage moratorium proposal, followed by item 8E, which is the bond opportunities for land development, followed by digital freeway billboards, et cetera. If the council were to approve this, we have revised agendas to hand out to the council for your use tonight, as well as for members of the audience, so you can follow along with the new order. But this is so that we can get through the items that absolutely require council action tonight. So with that, those are the recommendations that we have for you tonight related to the agenda.
And just to be clear, part of this is because there's important items that are time sensitive, including the budget, and I have a hard stop for activities that draw me away from here, probably somewhere around 9:30. We won't be done by then, but I want to make sure that we get to these items tonight. So do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the revised agenda.
All in favor? Actually, we have to do a roll call and everything. So roll call, please.
I'm sorry, I got a question.
Yes.
Is there a reason the vice mayor couldn't continue the meeting?
He's going to continue the meeting. The problem is out of being able to be part of the agenda, some things that are sensitive to the city, the arrangement allows for me to participate as long as possible.
I understand. Okay.
Yes. Good question. So we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Councilmember Stockton. Yes. Councilmember Silva.
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ritchie.
Yes.
Mayor Carly.
Yes. All right, so that'll be the new order. Please provide the updated version, and I believe there's updated versions for the public as well? Yes? If not, yes, it looks like there is. Okay, now that we have moved on to with a new updated agenda, let's continue the meeting. We are now on to item 4, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call.
Vice Mayor Ritchie.
Yes.
Councilmember Stockton.
Yes.
Councilmember Silva.
Yes.
Member Chapman.
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley.
Yes.
Mayor Carly.
Yes. All right, we'll move on to presentations. And for that, I'm going to ask that our Assistant City Manager, Georgianne Megger-Smith, come forward and do the introductions.
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council, I'm proud to be serving as your interim Parks and Recreation Director here tonight. Not only because we're here kicking off July as Parks and Recreation Month, but also because I'm consistently impressed with what a dedicated team we have that really brings a lot of innovative and inclusive recreation opportunities to the community. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass it along to your recreation managers, Elizabeth Crisante and Melody Ocampo.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. As mentioned, I'm Melody Ocampo, Recreation Manager, and with me this evening is my co-manager, Elizabeth Crisante. We are here this evening with a brief presentation celebrating Parks and Recreation Month. So the Parks and Recreation Department employs 26 full-time staff and 200 part-time staff. Why do we need so many people? We offer over 22 unique program areas and services to the Vacaville community for every age and ability. I won't list them all. This past year, our team has been hard at work to enhance and develop new recreation amenities for our community. As you can see, we have a lot to offer. Recent and current projects include the Mariposa Center Play Area in District 4, Corderos Park Soccer Goals in District 1, Three Oaks Community Center Play Structure in District 5, Centennial and Arlington Park Shade Structures in Districts 1 and 6, Corderos Park in District 1, Meadowlands Park in District 2, Trower Park in District 3, Sierra Vista Park in District 4, Alamo Creek Park in District 5, Pheasant Country Park in District 6, Owl Park at Roberts Ranch in District 2, Magnolia Park Phase 2 in District 6, and Unity Meadows Park at Vannon Meadows in District 6, as well as Lagoon Valley Dog Park and Archery Range in District 5, Centennial Bike Park in District 1, and Nashamesto Phase 2 in Brighton Landing, District 2. As you can see, there's a variety of dates that corresponded with those various projects. They are works in progress, some are completed, but as you can see, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and it eventually does come to fruition. At this time, I will turn it over to my colleague, Elizabeth Crisante.
Good evening. So in addition to planning, building, and rehabbing parks and open spaces, we have also been making enhancements and improvements to various amenities as well. New scoreboards at Nelson Park, a monument sign at Keating, a new projector system at VPAT, the new flooring at Davis Street Recreation Center, and most recently, the rehab and conversion of tennis courts to pickleball courts at North Orchard. Next slide. Next, there we go. Next, let's look at a year's worth of events. So starting with this point last summer, we hosted a variety of community-wide events such as the Creek Walk concerts and the 4th of July fireworks celebration, which provide an opportunity for people to gather and feel a sense of community. By the end of the summer, attendance numbers are typically exceeding 10,000. Next slide. In the fall, we hosted our furry friends at Halloween. We dove for pumpkins at the pool, and we honored Dia de los Muertos. 3 very different events, but all with a common thread of fun and celebration. Moving into the winter, as you all know, we hosted the very big and very successful Merriman on Main. We brought holiday celebrations to the neighborhoods with Neighborhood Santa, and we hosted our annual Breakfast with Santa, which provided a more intimate setting for participants to interact with the big man himself. In the springtime, we celebrated eggs, bunnies, pop culture, cosplay, and the Vacatry for youth. With these slides, what these slides show is that Parks and Recreation provides a variety of experiences to the community that achieve a balance between traditional and trend setting. So in the last year, we took in over 25,000 program registrations for 5,000 activities offered, and we had almost 2,800 people on the waiting list. I think it's safe to say that there's a high demand for what we offer. Next slide. In between all of this, we had an exciting year of innovation where we implemented internal processes and systems to better streamline work product and efficiency, all the while creating opportunities for program expansion. Next slide. So with July being Parks and Recreation Month, please take some time to get out and visit one of our many programs, events, parks, and open spaces. We promise you will not be disappointed. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation, and I do have a proclamation this evening. I'd like to read it, and it's exciting to see all the things that are happening, and when you start listing the parks and all the amenities that are being offered. It just shows you the importance of what it brings to our community through your department. So thank you very much. So whereas California is fortunate to have a variety of park systems that provide countless recreational opportunities for residents and visitors alike, and parks help to preserve and protect the natural and cultural resources of California and offer pleasant surroundings for leisure activities, relaxation, and recreation. And whereas safe parks and recreation programs help prevent social problems, offer positive alternatives for youth, contribute to good health, enhance the desirability of locations for new businesses and families, stimulate tourism revenue, and generally provide an overall improved quality of life. Whereas thousands of Vacaville children, adults, and seniors benefit from the wide range of services, facilities, and programs provided by the Vacaville Parks and Recreation Department, and the City of Vacaville recognizes and honors the vital contributions that the Vacaville Community Services Commission, employees, and volunteers make each and every day to ensure that Vacaville's parks and recreation programs and facilities are well maintained and are a refuge where residents can relax, connect with family and friends, and reduce stress in their daily lives. So now, therefore, be it resolved that I, John Carley, Mayor of the City of Vacaville, on behalf of the Vacaville City Council, do hereby proclaim July 2024 Parks and Recreation Month in the City of Vacaville, and urge residents to enjoy and recognize the social, physical, mental, economic, environmental, and community benefits derived from our parks and recreation facilities. So congratulations and thank you for all that you do. Okay, we're going to move on to the consent calendar. We have items A through G. Any member of the public or the council wishing to pull an item for discussion? Seeing none, do I have a motion? Motion and a second. Roll call.
Councilmember Wiley? Yes. Vice Mayor Ritchie?
Yes.
Councilmember Stockton?
Yes.
Councilmember Silva?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Mayor Carley?
Yes. Moving on to item 7, business from the floor. This is an opportunity for the public to address the council on items that are not on tonight's agenda, but that are in our jurisdiction. If you'd like to speak, come forward. And for those who are willing to present themselves to be next so that we can do this in an orderly fashion, go ahead and make a line. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Excuse me. I was at the 2 o'clock meeting with the County Board of Supervisors, and it appeared about 3 times as many people were against the California Forever, which was, I didn't expect that many, actually. I had some thoughts about that. 15-minute cities is a concept. Go to the internet, you can see for yourselves. It's a concept that gained a lot of traction before 2020, slightly before 2020, and it's picked up traction since then. People found out they could do a lot of work at home, staying off the roads, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But the 15-minute city concept is also a Red Chinese concept. I didn't know that. They have 15-minute cities, compounds. People are basically surrounded by barriers, not physical barriers, but other types of coercions that would keep them there. Now, that may not be too bad either if they can perform all the functions of life that they should and would want to, but they have 1 camera for every 4 people with advanced facial recognition technology from our Silicon Valley. Something to think about. My final thought is that years ago, and it's probably been 30 years ago since I saw the rerun. I saw it as a kid. And that was Twilight Zone episode. Aliens came down to Earth. Earth was going to blow itself up. So they showed up and said, we're going to keep you from blowing yourself up We're going to make society better, and they did. They had super weapons so nobody would go against them. There was peace. They got some sort of economic roller coaster going. Everything was fine. And then they said, well, why don't you come to our planet because it's even better for a visit? People started going into these flying vehicles, and people at home were receiving letters of how wonderful it was to be at this planet. Well, there was a book floating around. The book was, it was titled To Serve Man. And everybody believed it was a good book. But right at the end of the movie, as one of the scientists was going aboard, somebody yelled out, "Don't go aboard, it's a cookbook." So you can see that even the best of propositions, the glossiest of Shangri-La, can be very deceptive.
Good evening.
Good evening. I too was at the Board of Supervisors meeting this afternoon, and yes, the supervisors did vote to have a study before putting the California Forever on the ballot. The reason that the study is needed is because most people who vote for local government assume that those people who are going to give their time to local government care about the people who vote for them and not their own back pocket. Most of the people who are in favor of California Forever expect to make money out of it, some a lot of money. The voters who are likely going to be voting on this, most of them are really uninformed about what the impact of California Forever is going to be upon the 7 existing cities in Solano County. We've all been over this before. The important thing is that the majority of voters only know what they see from the slick advertising that they've been bombarded with from California Forever. And they don't realize that one of the first things, for example, that's got to happen is Highways 12 and 113 are going to be vastly expanded just to get the equipment in there to work. Who's going to pay for that? It's not going to be anybody from Silicon Valley, because the way the rules are all set up, hey, Caltrans is going to buy those right-of-ways. It's going to pave over existing wetland through the Sassoon area. And we're paying for all this, not the people in Flannery. Most voters in Solano County who think that this is going to be some sort of, Christmas gift have no idea how heavily we're going to wind up paying for this, not only in the environmental degradation, but also in the fact that just the initial investment in widening the roads is all going to be borne by the taxpayers. And then when it comes to the fact that this city is going to be built up and is going to have such promoters behind it, it's going to take industry or take commercial opportunity out of these cities in order to attract it there, because they'll make it worth their while.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and staff. My name is Danielle Shea, and I'm representing the Vacaville People's Forum this evening to present a declaration we developed using language from the original Pride Proclamation request. This declaration expresses our support and solidarity with Vacaville's LGBTQIA+ community following the mayor's refusal to sign the city-issued proclamation for Pride Month. Over 200 community members have signed this declaration. In recognition that June is a time for those who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual, and other gender or sexual expressions to celebrate their long quest for human rights, the people of Vacaville, California do declare as follows. Whereas 55 years ago, in June of 1969, a riot at a Manhattan gay bar, the Stonewall Inn, in reaction to a police raid, precipitated the modern fight for LGBTQIA+ rights. And whereas, because of acts of courage by those who demanded justice and those who quietly pushed for progress, our nation has made great strides in recognizing what these brave individuals long knew to be true in their hearts, that love is love and no person should be judged by anything other than the content of their character. And whereas 2015's landmark Supreme Court decision was a historic victory for LGBTQIA+ Americans, guaranteeing marriage equality in all 50 states, ensuring dignity for same-sex couples and therefore all couples, and whereas for every partnership that was not previously recognized under the law and for every American who was denied basic civil rights, this monumental ruling instilled newfound hope, affirming the belief that we are all freer when we are treated as equals. And whereas despite this extraordinary progress, LGBTQIA+ Americans still face discrimination simply for being who they are, and there remains much work to be done to extend the promise of our country to every American. And whereas in memory of the 49 victims of the 2016 Pulse nightclub massacre in Orlando, Florida, the 5 victims of the 2022 mass shooting at the Club Q gay bar in Colorado Springs, Colorado, the countless transgender individuals murdered for who they are, and a history of violence against the LGBTQIA+ community, it is ever more important that we continue to push for equality, protections, and acceptance of people everywhere. And whereas the LGBTQIA+ community was hit harder than most by the COVID-19 pandemic because of healthcare disparities and economic instabilities, and whereas 2024 marks 26 years since Solano County began serving and supporting the LGBTQIA+ community through the organization known as Solano Pride Center, and whereas the city of Vacaville is located within the greater San Francisco Bay Area, which has been a leader in the fight for LGBTQIA+ rights, yet has a mayor who in this 21st century is the only Bay Area mayor unwilling to officially acknowledge the LGBTQIA+ community struggle or celebrate its victories, bringing shame and dishonor to our city. Now therefore be it resolved that we, the people of Vacaville, proudly stand with the LGBTQIA+ community of Solano County and with all communities who struggle for human rights, acceptance, visibility, safety, and the quest for full equality under law. And I'm going to stop.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
In the interest of time, I'll just say good evening to all of you at the same time. My name is Debbie Lavigne, and I'm actually here to address you, Chief Carley. I'm a mother and a longtime citizen of Vacaville, and I also volunteer as facilitator for Vacaville Police Department's Neighborhood Court Program, our restorative justice program, which was instated during your tenure as Chief of Police. And so, as you know, restorative justice seeks to hold the defendant accountable by seeking solutions to repair the harms caused to victims. But restorative justice also asks us to recognize when we have caused harm in our community and be willing to make things right. It is through this lens that I ask you to consider the consequences of your decision not to sign the proclamation that could have been read at the Pride in the Park and the harms that it's caused to many of the people in our community. I don't believe you would ever intend harm, much less grave harm. I'm asking you to weigh the consequences of your decision. As our mayor, upon being elected, you said, I have listened to people. I'm assuming by that you mean all people. And you also said Vacaville is more than a place, it's a feeling of safety and security. And again, I'm assuming you mean all people. Safety and security for all people. With this in mind, I ask you to consider what your decision means to Vacaville's youth and the unintended consequences. Perhaps one consequence is the empowerment of anti-gay sentiment and harm to innocent people. This concerns me. As we know, mental health issues exist at a higher rate within the LGBTQ community, as do suicide rates. Just last year, we lost several gay high school students to suicide. Can you defend your position to their parents? As mayor, are you concerned with the well-being of all people? I'm sure you'll answer yes to that. But really, the truth is going to lie in the actions. We all know that. And so on the other hand, who's being harmed by the signing of the proclamation? I'd submit nobody. To those you represent who openly express anti-LGBTQIA+ sentiment, whether you know it or not, you love somebody who's gay. This may be your son, daughter, niece, nephew, cousin, or your best friend's child. It's also personal. While a middle schooler, my own son was brutally bullied and called derogatory slurs such as fag. I don't know if my son was gay, but he did suffer greatly at the hand of his peers. Why do I not know? Because my son tragically took his own life. I know anyone sitting in this room today would want their child back, gay or straight. How do young kids learn such harmful behaviors? I think we all know the answer to that. And your not signing the proclamation has exponential power to embolden these very misled young people. So it is these harms I'm asking you to consider. I'm asking you to bear the weight of your position and shoulder the tough responsibility of representing the interests of all Vacaville's people. Please let your actions match your own statements. Thank you, Mayor Carly.
Thank you, and I'm sorry for the loss of your son. Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, well, I'm not here to be my usual acerbic self. Thank you for your leadership and bearing on your shoulders as the mayor. Good judgment. I wanted to comment briefly about today's meeting at the Board of Supervisors. And of course, it was terrible. We could only talk for 1 minute. You know that's going to kill me. There was a lot of commonality and common ground there with all the people who weren't paid, because there were a lot of people who were paid to be there or would be paid, as one of my colleagues had pointed out. And I'm reminded, and the judgment of the council, because the other speaker who said that we elect you to function on our behalf for our best benefit. I remember riding from, and I told you this, old guys repeat stories, riding up from Santa Cruz to visit my grandparents in Sunnyvale, and we'd go along the El Camino, and their fruit stands and the orchards were there. It was just so beautiful. And there was never a rush. Even you couldn't rush. It was a 2-lane highway, you know. Then over time, the developers would come in, and I had to learn this later because at the time I was pretty young. They buy the agricultural land at the agricultural price. Then they convince the politicians to rezone it, and immediately the value of the land quadruples or better. Then that land's developed with the promise of green space, and then that green space is, they do a land swap. So that green space, you have to have an offset somewhere else that can never be developed. So what the developers do is they either buy or contract land some other place, not in the community. That land will never be developed. In fact, there's a business of buying real estate that would be put into land swaps and undevelopable to offset the no longer green space so it could be developed. So eventually they made a lot of money, and we developed the orchards went away, the fruit stands went away, and we had a concrete jungle. And then on the hills, if you had enough dough, you could build up there on the hills, and the beautiful golden California hills covered. I'm glad that the city of Vacaville thus far has promoted the green space and equal development within the city, so that we're all working under the same rules to keep a beautiful community. And I think our Board of Supervisors are aimed that direction, and their good judgment hopefully will take into account the items in the proclamation that I mentioned to you by the Republican Central Committee they passed unanimously 3 months ago. Those elements should be addressed in their plan. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, I'm going to close the public comment business from the floor, and we will move on to item 8A. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. This next item before you is an interim ordinance imposing urgency measures related to battery energy storage systems. We have Albertino and Pamela Devon from our planning department to make a presentation for the council.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. The item before you tonight is an extension request of the interim ordinance that was passed to prohibit battery energy storage systems. Some background on how we got to this location. Back in March of this year, we held a study session and discussed what battery energy storage systems were and what's going on with them, and council expressed some concern about there being insufficient regulations within our municipal code to govern these. So City Council directed staff to prepare an interim ordinance that was brought back to City Council on May 14th. We held a public hearing and City Council voted to adopt this interim ordinance 1993, which established a 40-day prohibition on BESS within the City of Vacaville city limits and allowed staff to take a look at what could be done during that 45-day period. Another notable moment that occurred was on June 11th when the city published a 10-day written report at that City Council meeting. And it mainly identified the progress and measures that have been taken thus far during that 45-day period to alleviate the initial concerns about insufficient regulations. So to recap what an interim ordinance is, it's covered underneath the government code. It's used to prohibit uses that are in conflict with the city's general plan or zoning. It's based off of an urgency measure, which could be a specific adverse impact upon the public health or safety. It's needed to prohibit that particular use to mitigate or avoid potential impacts. And there's no feasible alternative to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid those impacts. And so an initial term can be set for 45 days with a one-time extension of 22 months and 15 days for a total of 2 years. Some more recapping of what a BESS facility is. The definitions identified on the screen for the council as well as for the community. And there's two main types of BESS facilities. There are grid scale, front of the meter types of facilities that are larger scale energy generation and storage facilities. These are your power plants, solar parks, and large scale energy storage facilities. There's also small scale behind the meter facilities that are really customer-sided and stationary storage systems that might be in your garage for single-family residences or within commercial buildings that are used to help those businesses, or maybe even in hospitals. So in this particular case, what we had noted back in May about the urgency measures associated with why we were bringing this request, we found that there were no existing policies, procedures, or standards that could regulate BESS facilities and not allow them to be developed within city limits, and that more time was needed to conduct research and analysis. We found that BESS facilities are very unpredictable, and there are some legitimate safety concerns associated with these facilities, and that because of the location of the Vaca-Dixon substation within our city limits, there's a high desirability to be located within the Vacaville. Another action that occurred was Solano County prohibiting BESS facilities also, and that added further pressure on other potential builders to locate within the City of Vacaville city limits. And then finally, under SB 38, there is an obligation to develop an emergency response plan or emergency action plan for BESS facilities. We have no regulations or processes in place that would allow for that interaction to occur with other agencies within Solano County as well as our own emergency services. When we're talking about applicability for this prohibition extension, we're mainly looking at grid scale, front of the meter BESS facilities, those larger facilities that might be located next to substations. It would not preclude the state's opt-in application process that's allowed under AB 205 and would not apply to those behind the meter facilities that might be located within single family homes, hospitals. Those are facilities that already have to comply with the California Building Code and Fire Code, and they have to obtain a building permit through the City of Vacaville. Going back on, another obligation that the city was required to comply with as part of the adoption of the 45-day prohibition is a 10-day written report. It's identified that a municipality must produce this report under the government code, and the written report is mainly intended to outline the measures that have been taken during that 45-day period to help alleviate any conditions that led to that 45-day prohibition. And so we publish those findings within that 10-day report. It's required 10 days prior to the expiration of the initial ordinance. That's why it was published in that June 11th City Council packet. And what the 10-day report noted was that the city's already undergoing efforts to work with a company called Larson Tubro on the feasibility study of creating and hopefully identifying ways for the city to generate renewable energy, but it was also looking at other feasibility site locations for BESS facilities. The anticipated completion of that study is October 2025. We actually had our kickoff meeting today with that group to talk about next steps for that particular study. We also conducted some research during that initial 45-day period to analyze SB 38, and we found that there was really additional times needed to collaborate with our fire department to develop an emergency response and an emergency action plan. There's much time that's needed to analyze other state laws to figure out how an ordinance would interact with those state laws. We'd likely utilize city and county GIS to figure out other potential locations where it would be viable to locate BESS facilities. Our intent is to also attend some training programs and collaborate with other jurisdictions and agencies and maybe even some industry experts to figure out what's the best route for developing an ordinance. And then we're also planning on developing public information materials and identifying who those stakeholders are that need to be involved with the drafting of this ordinance. The main point of all of this is that we really need to develop an ordinance that's going to govern how these are going to work. And for all of those reasons, what we're requesting is some additional time. And so with that, we have a recommendation for City Council to by title only and by 4/5 vote, roll call to vote to adopt an extension to this urgency ordinance that would effectually put it until June 25th of 2026. That concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions.
And thank you for the presentation. Clearly, we've been familiar with this item. Any questions from the council? Councilmember Wiley?
I believe I know the answer to this, but if some battery company is outside the city limits, this does not apply to them at all. This is only for people within Vacaville city limits. Is that correct?
Correct.
Councilmember Silva, do you have any questions?
I do not. Motion. Oh.
So if I may, I just have one clarification.
Yes.
Any extended ordinance would be good through May 14th, 2026, which is 2 years from the initial adoption of the urgency ordinance.
So May, okay. All right. I'm going to open up to the public for comment. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. I'm here to speak on behalf of Keep Vacaville Safe. Unfortunately, Sarah Dunn couldn't be here. We want to first thank you all for listening to us over the past year. I know that we were pretty, sometimes, gave our opinion, and we just appreciate you listening to us. We want to also thank you for approving the initial moratorium on BESS facilities. And we're respectfully asking you to say yes and extend the full 22 months and 15 days in agreement with the staff report. This special request to protect residents that live near Vaca-Dixon substation from specifically lithium-ion battery storage because of the known hazards they pose, which we've gone over the last year. We're not against renewable energy. I just want to make that clear. We are hoping for the next development that is safer for our community. So I'll keep it short. We just respectfully ask you to extend. Keep in mind the county has a moratorium in place for this while they sift through the weeds and find their grounding of where Solano County should stand with these facilities. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, I would like you to extend the moratorium on BESS battery systems another 22 months. We continue to see more problems with lithium-ion battery storage. There are energy companies focused on building their systems in Vacaville. Their sole interest is profit. They are pushing to put them in our community, not theirs. There are many things to consider during the moratorium. Hopefully you've already decided against lithium-ion battery storage. If not, I hope that company doing the research is able to provide enough information for you to vote no to not allow them. If you do allow BESS systems, what kind? How large? Where? Is there a limit on how many will be allowed in our community? The amount of total land space allocated? Who will be allowed to build them? Unknown entities hiding behind LLCs and shell companies? Foreign-based companies? Will there be a process for the community to voice our concerns with projects, or will it simply filling out paperwork? Once you start allowing them to be built, it's like the floodgates will be open. There needs to be a way to limit them. Then there's other things to consider. The entire idea of requiring more building, convincing people to switch from other sources of energy to all electric, whether it's cars or heaters, all while saying that our energy grid cannot support it, then shutting down sources of electricity. These all start to appear like someone is creating a problem and at the same time creating the required solution to the problem. These are all things to think about during the moratorium. Thank you for listening to our concerns throughout this process.
Thank you.
Many people more eloquent than I have already spoken ad nauseum on this subject. We know from what we went through last year that all the members of the City Council are very well informed about how bad lithium-ion plants are. We don't want to become a chemical waste dump. Yes, please extend the moratorium for 22 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. And no, there aren't many more eloquent than myself. A couple of days ago, lithium, now this is a question of scale of how much lithium, but lithium manufacturing facility exploded, 22 dead, gazillions injured. And you know what? The fire department did respond, but the people were still dead. And I very much appreciate the concern and the perspective that this council has developed. Again, wow, I'm giving you guys a bunch of love tonight. Thank you much.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. I think it's important to note that the additional 22 months, you need at least that much time. The staff, as you know, the planning department and the staff, they handle many projects. They're not here just to evaluate best projects. They have a lot on their plate. This is a very complex type of project, and it carries with it known risks. It's not even really a risk. It's actually a hazard. It's something is going to happen. It's a matter of when and how bad is it going to be. And you really need to carefully take the time to study. You need to meet with other agencies that are also crafting policies and procedures and readdressing, looking at their code and zoning and everything to address these projects. And you need to meet with all of the other agencies that are, basically handling the same problem. This takes a lot of time. You need the 22 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead and close the public comment. Bring it back to the council. Yeah, can you put the action item up just so that it's clear as we're moving forward? Councilmember Silva, do you have any comments?
No, sir.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the extension.
A second.
Motion and second. Roll call.
Councilmember Stockton?
Yes.
Councilmember Silva?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ritchie?
Yes.
Mayor Carley?
Yes. All right. Thank you very much for the presentation. You've got some work to do. Mr. City Manager, what do we have next?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. The next item before you is a two-part item included in one report, and that relates to the BOLD program. The first part is the council's request to adopt the BOLD program, and then secondly, to evaluate and approve an application into the BOLD program. Ken Metzamia, our finance director, is here with the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. As the City Manager mentioned, tonight's public hearing has 2 items for consideration. The first is seeking authorization to use the Bond Opportunities for Land Development, or BOLD program, as a pilot program with additional guidelines and criteria for developers to participate. The second item, assuming the first is approved, is acceptance of the first application to the BOLD pilot program for the 700 Park on Main project. Starting with some background on the BOLD program, BOLD is a financing program offered by the California Municipal Finance Authority that can be used to finance public infrastructure and qualifying development impact and connection fees required for new development. Although the city has the ability to issue bonds and form CFDs on its own, a key benefit BOLD presents is the ability to take small bond offerings and pull them together with other bonds. This allows small development projects access to the bond financing that may not have been available to attract public bond investors on their own due to their size and move their projects forward. Under BOLD, bonds are issued by a Community Facilities District, or CFD, formed and managed by CMFA with input from the local government agency. Unlike a majority of the city's current CFDs, BOLD would only be used for the financing of public infrastructure and development and connection fees, not ongoing services. The bonds issued would be payable from CFD special taxes levied on the property within the boundary of the form CFD. Properties outside of the CFD boundary would not be levied or be responsible for paying any of the special taxes. So in order to join BOLD, the city must be a member of CMFA, which we are, hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution authorizing its use, approve the developer application submitted into the program, and additionally, the bond councils of the BOLD program will approve the eligibility of the public improvements and fees based on discussion and acceptance by the city. The program has been in place for over 6 years and is used by municipalities and public agencies throughout the state, including Fairfield and Suisun City here in Solano County. Based on council and public comments and feedback received at the May 28th public hearing, staff is proposing consideration of BOLD as a pilot program with additional guidelines to limit its applicability. Although there was general support for use of BOLD at the prior public hearing, some of the concerns raised included the cost of the eventual homeowner and annual increase, the term stacking of the BOLD CFD tax on a development where a CFD already exists, and that the BOLD program could turn to a free-for-all without additional eligibility criteria. Based off that feedback, we're proposing the following 7 additional criteria. The first is that it would be limited to residential projects within the downtown specific plan boundary that are smaller than 5 acres in size. No existing requirement to form or annex into a city CFD. And that we limit the maximum total tax rate on the property tax bill, including the BOLD CFD tax, school bonds, and every other tax that you would see on your property tax bill if you were to look at every single one of those lines, that be limited to 1.8% of the projected average sales price of a home within the project at the time of formation. The last 3 criteria are that the BOLD program CFD tax cannot increase annually by greater than 2% per year, that the project costs allowed to be financed are limited to BOLD eligible public improvements and infrastructure and related costs, for example, streets, water lines, etc., and development impact and connection fees. The developer application to participate in the program must be accepted by the City Council prior to consideration by CMFA. Under the proposed use of the program would be limited to smaller infill residential projects within the downtown area. Within the downtown specific plan, there are potentially 10 to 15 housing sites smaller than 5 acres where developers have expressed interest in development. Of all these sites, there's 1 project that has received planning approval as close to building permit issuance, and that's the 700 Park on Main project. The developer has requested to participate in the pilot program. The pilot program also proposes limiting the max property tax burden to 1.8% of the projected average sales price of a home in the project. So this is lower than the 2% allowed under CMFA's requirements and is inclusive of all taxes listed on the property tax bill, not just the BOLD tax. And then under the program, the BOLD special tax would also be limited to a maximum increase annually of 2%, which is consistent with the limit that's also placed on general property tax under Prop 13. The pilot program criteria also adds further transparency to the application process, as each potential application to the program would have to be accepted by council prior to submittal into BOLD. This is an additional guideline that isn't required by CMFA, which really only requires that staff approve it. What we're proposing here is that each application be brought to council. So the second part of tonight's presentation is mentioned, assuming the BOLD pilot program is authorized, is acceptance of the first application into the pilot program, which is for 700 Park on Main. As mentioned earlier, this is the only project currently in the downtown specific plan area that has planning approval, is close to building permit issuance, and has requested participation into the program. The developer Black Pine 700 Park previously entered into a deposit and reimbursement agreement and made an initial deposit with the city to cover the costs associated with the evaluation of potentially forming the CFD internally by the city. And so during this evaluation process, it was determined that the BOLD program would be a better option to form the CFD rather than form it here internally at the city, given the smaller bond issuances that would be required for the project. If council authorizes use of the BOLD pilot program this evening, council is also being requested to accept this application as mentioned. And the project's approved tentative map allows for 81 residential units and 2 commercial buildings. Residences will include single-family detached homes. Commercial uses will include 2 separate buildings totaling approximately 3,000 square feet, plus public access to an open patio courtyard area at the corner of Main Street and Wilson Street. This project is viewed as a catalyst project for the city's downtown specific plan and has been in the works for over 7 years. Some additional information on the project. So 700 Park on Main is comprised of 2 locations as shown here on the map. So phase 1 includes sites 1 and 2, located at Main Street and Wilson Street, and phase 2, which is site 3, is located at Bush Street and Depot Street. Phase 1 development activity started in mid-2023 with soil remediation work. Grading is scheduled to start in August, September of 2024, so right around the corner. Phase 1 infrastructure construction is slated to begin in October of 2024, and then with Phase 2, soil remediation and grading is expected to commence in spring of 2025. Infrastructure construction is expected to take about 2 years, and the first residential occupancy is expected in late April, May of 2025. So the proposed project meets the eligibility criteria, the additional eligibility criteria of the pilot program, and is requesting financing for public infrastructure and development impact and connection fees. The application and the cost estimate were included as attachments to the staff report as shown on this page. The cost estimate currently is about $4.8 million. The maximum tax rate for the project is estimated to be 1.6% to 1.8%, which would be in line with the proposed guidelines. And if accepted by council, the application would be submitted to BOLD, where the tax rate and the eligibility of the improvements and fees would be further refined through that BOLD vetting process. So with that, there are 2 recommendations. The first is to authorize the use of the BOLD program with the additional pilot program guidelines. And the second, assuming the first passes, is to accept the first application for the 700 Park on Main project for submission into the BOLD program. With that, I'd be happy to take questions. And the developer is also here as well if you have questions specifically on that project.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Chapman.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Question, it sounds like an excellent project to take on, to pilot anyway. You had mentioned that there are some neighboring cities that have used BOLD. Did you have an opportunity to speak with them about possible challenges that they encountered?
I have not, no, not, I know there's one development in Fairfield and another one's just in the city, but I've not asked them specifically about the challenges or heard of any related to those projects.
Oh, okay.
Councilmember Wiley.
Thanks for the information. I feel like that really helps a lot to have these parameters set. The one question on slide 7, you talked about 81 units, and then we talked about sites 1, 2, and 3. Are 81 units the total of sites 1, 2, and 3? And how many would be built in site 1?
Yeah, so the 81 would be the total for the entire site. As far as the breakdown for the entire project, as far as the breakdown between the different sites, I'm sure if the developer can share the breakdown between the 2 or the 3 sites.
We'll have the developer come up and answer that question, so it takes the pressure off of you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mike Harris with Black Pine. Thank you. The project is broken up into 3 sites. There's 3 parcels. Sites 1 and 2 will be the first phase of 46. Site 3, which is the second phase, is 35.
Thank you. Councilmember Silva, do you have any questions?
all my questions were answered last meeting and for this meeting.
Okay, great. Councilmember Roberts.
Yeah, appreciate the presentation. You answered some of the questions that I had from last meeting. I know you present on here the 1.6 to 1.8% range for property tax. I know that's overall, would that be the same for like all bold projects going forward? Is that specific for this piece? And does it differentiate between like single family residence versus multifamily? And like the condos are kind of a weird in between because they're kind of stacked on each other, but they're still for purchase homes.
So the 1.6 to 1.8% that's mentioned on this is specific to the 700 Park on Main project, and how that would be assessed on the different types of units within development. That would be kind of refined as part of the rate and method of apportionment. What would apply to every single bold project is that top range of 1.8%. So there would be no project under the proposed guidelines that could be higher than 1.8% in total.
And then is the commercial subjected to the same percentage for the bold? For the 700 Park, because it's a mixed use property.
That would be kind of further discussed with the developer as part of the rate and method of apportionment. I mean, it could be part of it, or it could be left down and it just goes on the residential portion of it.
I think it'd be fair to share it amongst everybody on the property, just be equal amongst all of them there. This is my comments. All right, thank you.
Open up to the public for comment, and if the developer wishes to speak, you may come forward as well.
Hi. I have a few questions. The cost estimate of $4.8 million, does that include the interest on the bond that the residents who purchase the condos will have to pay? And if it doesn't include the interest, what's sort of the cost estimate with financing over whatever period? I'm assuming 30 years, but I don't know. And then the other question I have is for staff. There was a lot of time put into the downtown specific plan, a lot of time. But I don't remember, and just listening to planning commission meetings and council meetings, I don't know how much effort was put into finding ways to incentivize development for the downtown specific plan. So this particular program that came to the last council meeting, I was frankly surprised to see this, because I would think, indebting your residents, because again, this is going to go on the property tax bill, so people who buy these condos have to pay a higher tax, and they're paying, you call it a tax or assessment, they're paying something that most residents don't pay, and they're paying an obligation of the developer, right? So to me, this seems like the last resort. So what other options did staff consider to incentivize the development to pay for infrastructure? Did the city consider a moratorium, a deferred impact fee arrangement, something other than taxing the residents that are going to be buying these condos? Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, I'm going to close the public comment on this item and bring it back to the council. And I don't know if there's an ability to answer any of those questions.
Yeah, so the question about the 4.8 million, so that amount is the cost estimate for the actual infrastructure improvements, and it doesn't include the financing for the bonds, the interest on that. This is really more so like what the estimate is for building the actual improvements, and then for the development impact fees. The actual interest that's going to need to be paid, so the debt service, the actual principal and interest, to pay that, it needs to fit within that 1.8% that I was mentioning earlier. But the 4.8 million that's mentioned here it's unrelated to the bond piece. It's really the improvements and the fees portion of it.
Okay, and just for clarification, there is an end date to a bold program. In other words, is it indefinite, or is there an end date to the payoff?
As far as so for the bond, unlike our services CFDs that continue on to perpetuity because they are services related, with infrastructure financing like this, it does end. And so there is an end date. Once the debt is actually paid off, then you'll see the the debt payments cease to be on the property tax bill after that time. It might not be immediately after, but then there is definitely an end date that gets refined and kind of finalized as part of that rate and method of apportionment process that I was mentioning earlier.
Vice Mayor Ritchie.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Really appreciate how you guys made it. I think keep it simple. Other word is very, very easy to go. It's exciting. I really appreciate the opportunity for Blackpine to come back and really identify this. This is a catalyst. This is a part of the Downtown Pacific Plan. It's so important that we get this done. It really kind of energize. That would be kind of the one side of the downtown plan. I'm very happy for it. So passionate like it was last time. You know, the question is, the burden on our citizens, the burden on our residents, the comment, we're blessed in California to have Prop 13. Like, that's one of the last cool things about California. If you've been to any other states, everybody leaves here to go to Texas and Florida. It's average 4%. It sucks. California is absolutely blessed on the Prop 13. We're starting with the base tax rate of 1% plus adjustments. The burden on this property is less or more, no greater than any other property. New properties being built in our own city have CFDs and other Mellorues that equate to almost the same cost. They do. I do it all day long. So this is a great project. I appreciate everything that we're doing. This will help energize more properties. This is an amazing project. When other developers see this project go up, it's going to start a ripple effect through our community and help energize other lots. I'm very happy to hopefully approve this right now, so I can make a motion to approve.
And I'll allow you to make the motion after Councilmember Roberts. But I'll bring it back to you for the motion. Councilmember Roberts.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Of that 4.8 million, how much of that is actually fees from the city, the connection fees and impact fees? Do you know?
Yeah, so for the impact fees, it's a little over $1.7 million.
Okay. And then does that include the connection fees as well?
It does, yes. Okay. That's the DIF, the development impact fees and the connection fees.
Councilmember Stockton.
I just wanted to thank you for coming back, taking our suggestions in applying them to this, and I'm interested to see how this one turns out. So I'll second Councilmember Ritchie's motion.
Thank you. And it is an exciting opportunity to actually see movement in downtown. And one last comment before the roll call, and that is let's remember that redevelopment went away. Cities don't have funds the way they used to be able to work. And so they're all great questions, but there are limitations, and this is an opportunity, and I'm looking forward to it. So roll call. Actually, let me just check with Councilmember Silva. Did you have any comments that you want to make?
No.
Roll call.
Councilmember Chapman? Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ritchie?
Yes.
Councilmember Stockton?
Yes.
Councilmember Silva?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for the presentation, and it'll be exciting to see the project begin, and so it's been long overdue. So, next item, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. This next item before you is relating to a resolution and an ordinance regarding a municipal code amendment revising our sign ordinance. We have Noah Rumba and Albert Enoff and Payman Bavan, all from our planning department, here to make a presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, and members of the public. Noah Rambella, HUHIM Assistant Planner, and tonight the item before you are proposed zoning text amendments to the city's municipal code in order to create standards, policies, and procedures for digital freeway billboards. So the request before you tonight is to amend Title 14 of the Vacaville Municipal Code to include new policies, procedures, and standards for regulating digital freeway billboards, and to also amend the Vacaville Gateways Master Plan to revise policies regulating billboard development in the city. So as you may be aware, this all started once the city received an application from Clear Channel Outdoor last March, to convert one of their existing static or standard billboards into a digital freeway billboard. That billboard is located off of eastbound Interstate 80 near Kilkenny Road. And at that time, staff reviewed the proposal and determined that the proposed conversion into a digital billboard is currently prohibited under the current sign ordinance because digital billboards are not allowed in Vacaville. So in response to that application, The City Council held a study session in August of last year to determine whether or not the City Council wanted to move forward with allowing digital billboards in Vacaville. And in December of last year, you all initiated an amendment to the zoning ordinance to draft amendments to regulate new digital freeway billboards. So to start off with what a billboard is, the Vacaville Municipal Code defines a billboard using 4 different criteria. The first is that it's used for general advertising or hire. It's an accessory use to a property, so it's not the main principal use on the site. It's a profit center on its own, so it generates revenue. And then lastly, it also is only exclusively used for off-site advertising. And that's to say that it's not advertising any of the uses on-site, but rather uses or companies that exist off-site. For example, commercial centers that currently exist in Vacaville that have a freeway sign or that have monument signs, those are on-site advertising, while a billboard advertising Cache Creek, for example, is off-site advertising, and so that would be a billboard. Under the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, the city cannot control the message of the sign, but can only focus on non-communicative measures, such as the location and the size. And so that's what the proposed ordinance tonight focuses on. The ordinance first starts off with proposed policies for regulating digital freeway billboards. As was directed by council in December, new digital freeway billboards would only be allowed along Interstate 80 within the Northeast Growth Area, and that's the area between Leisuretown Road and Midway Road, and also along Interstate 505 north of Vacaville Parkway and west of Interstate 505. The map to the right of the screen shows the 2 different freeway corridors where digital freeway billboards would be allowed. The proposed ordinance also has policies regarding the removal of existing static or standard billboards that exist in the city. There's currently about 16 of these billboards, and so future development agreements for any proposal for a new digital freeway billboard would require that a billboard operator remove either 3 static or standard billboard structures or 4 static or standard billboard sign faces. Based on feedback that we've received from stakeholders, if a billboard operator does not have any other billboard assets in the city, they may provide offsetting benefits such as monetary contributions or community benefits that would be subject to review and approval by the City Council. The ordinance also contains policies regarding pre-existing non-conforming digital billboards. There are currently 2 existing legal non-conforming billboards in Vacaville, one at the Vacaville Auto Mall and another at Nut Tree Village. And so under the proposed ordinance, they may continue to operate as originally approved, but any proposal to modify them or to extend their approval would require consistency with the new standards that are proposed in the ordinance and also require negotiation of a new development agreement. The ordinance also outlines the review and approval procedures for how a digital freeway billboard application would be processed. An applicant would be required to get entitlements for a development agreement, a conditional use permit, and also major design review, all of which would be subject to review by the Planning Commission and ultimately approval by City Council. The development agreement portion of their application must provide for the relocation of the existing static billboards and also provide one-time fees and ongoing revenue sharing to the city, all of which would be used for freeway beautification efforts. And then also following City Council approval, the billboard operator would also need to get separate approval from Caltrans for their proposed billboard. The flowchart to the right kind of outlines the approval process. Once the city receives the application, we'll review it for completeness, and it will be approved, or it will be reviewed by the Planning Commission, and then ultimately returning to City Council for final decision. And then lastly, the ordinance also includes standards for what digital billboards can look like. They must contain welcome signage, such as Vacaville or City of Vacaville. They need to have Vacaville-specific designs. They're limited to a maximum height of 65 feet, which is about the same height that is the same maximum height that is required for freeway signs that are currently allowed. There's a minimum separation requirement of 3,000 feet, and that's measured between different digital billboards. There's also a requirement to have a distance of at least 300 feet from sensitive receptors, and in this case, that is residential uses and lodging, such as hotels. They must also have landscaping, and these standards also apply in addition to the standards that Caltrans enforces. And all of these standards are based on the direction that was provided to staff by City Council in December. When we first received direction from City Council in December, there was the possibility of a 1,500-foot minimum separation requirement. However, upon further analysis, as part of the drafting of the ordinance, staff found that 1,500 feet may not be enough to prevent a proliferation of digital billboards in Vacaville. And so at the Planning Commission meeting, both staff and the commission recommended that the minimum separation requirement be increased to approximately 3,000 feet. And so this map here shows the maximum potential number of billboards that would be allowed under a 1,500-foot separation requirement. This is if you ignore zoning and just ignore all existing conditions and assume perfect spacing between billboards. This is the maximum potential. Up to 10 digital billboards would be allowed with 1,500 feet spacing on Interstate 80 and up to 6 on Interstate 505. And so under the recommended 3,000-foot minimum separation, this would decrease to 5 billboards along Interstate 80 and 3 digital billboards along 505. And again, this is assuming perfect spacing and ignoring real-world existing conditions. The proposed ordinance also has performance standards that govern how digital billboards are allowed to operate. For example, all messages must be static in order to reduce the possibility of distracting drivers. Messages must also be displayed for at least 8 seconds. The billboard must incorporate automatic dimming devices that change with ambient lighting conditions. And also the applicant must provide a lighting plan to the city to demonstrate the effect of lighting on the surrounding area. And then billboard operators must also be able to shut down the billboard remotely in case there's a malfunction. As part of this project or process, the city is also updating a document called the City Gateways Design Master Plan, which was first adopted in 1999 and then updated in 2002. This is the first update in over 20 years, and it's now being called the Vacaville Gateways Master Plan. And the reason this document is being revised is because it contains policies that relate to billboard development. And so in order to allow billboard development in the city, this document needs to be revised to, and it has been revised to now include policies that promote the continued removal of static billboards, but also to allow digital billboards if they provide offsetting community benefits and provide mechanisms to enhance the freeway experience. The plan has also been revised because we've been working with Caltrans to assure that these standards are consistent with their regulations, and we have updated the plan to do so as well. As you may recall, this whole ordinance drafting process began because the city received an application from Clear Channel Outdoor last March. That project was placed on hold in order for the city to start developing those regulations to govern digital billboards, because we can't accept an application for digital billboard if we don't have the standards to govern them. And so if the project were to move forward, the applicant would need to revise the project in order to comply with the proposed policies and standards if the city council chooses to adopt them tonight. However, there was a recent status change at the last planning commission in May. We did note that the applicant had withdrawn the project. However, on June 10th, the applicant requested that the city reactivate the project, and we have been able to accommodate that request. In order to evaluate the potential impacts of the project under the California Environmental Quality Act, the city has prepared an initial study and mitigated negative declaration to analyze the impacts of both the proposed zoning text amendments and also Clear Channel Outdoor's proposed digital billboard conversion. The document was published on April 18th, and the comment period closed on May 20th, during which the city received 3 comments. The environmental document identifies potential impacts to aesthetics, geology and soils, transportation, and tribal cultural resources, but the inclusion of mitigation measures will help to reduce these impacts to less than significant, and this will be done on a project-by-project basis with each digital freeway billboard application. Some of the notable mitigation measures include Aesthetics 1, which requires in-person field testing of the lighting impacts to assure compliance with proposed regulations. Transportation 1, which requires an annual report by the billboard operator to demonstrate their compliance with all applicable local, federal, and state regulations. And then also Transportation 2, which requires that billboard messages not contain movement and that they be static. Because the project is amending the city's municipal code, it is required to go to the Solano County Airport Land Use Commission for determination of consistency with the Nut Tree Airport and Travis Air Force Base compatibility plans. And that had to occur before taking the item to City Council tonight. And so on May 9th, this Airport Land Use Commission held a study session, and on June 13th, the commission determined that the project was consistent with those two airport plans on the condition that no billboards be allowed along Interstate 505 within the Nut Tree Airport area of influence, and that any billboards within that area of influence along Interstate 80 be referred back to the commission for their review prior to continuing on in the development review process. And then in April, the Planning Commission voted 6-1 to recommend approval of the proposed zoning text amendments. They did have some questions during that public hearing regarding billboard separation requirements. Specifically, they asked about the separation between static and digital billboards, which Caltrans does have a minimum requirement for, which is 500 feet. They also asked about forecasted revenue, to which staff responded that it would be revenue sharing would be negotiated on a case-by-case, project-by-project basis. And they also asked questions regarding public outreach, and staff informed the commission that billboard operators were heavily involved in the very long public outreach process that has been, that staff has conducted since October of last year, and that an informal public opinion poll was available to the council when you decided to initiate the zoning text amendments in December. Just to outline some of the staff's public outreach effort for this project, in October and November of last year, staff held community meetings, stakeholder meetings, and an online poll, all of which was compiled into a public outreach summary that's available as part of your staff report. The draft amendments were published for public review on February 21st, and that was available for 45 days for the public to comment on. We also did hold a study session, or a community meeting, a stakeholder meeting, and also a study session with the Planning Commission to discuss the proposed draft amendments and solicit feedback. And then additional notice was mailed on May 10th to inform stakeholders and community residents about this public hearing. And again, all of the public comments and the results and summary of all of the public outreach to date is included with the staff report packet. I also do want to note that staff, following the publication of the staff report, but prior to this meeting, we did receive 6 public comments, one expressing concern about the potential for proliferation of digital billboards in Vacaville and concerns about their safety, and then some other comments providing feedback as to expanding the potential for digital billboards in Vacaville. And staff does want to note that the ordinance that is before you tonight was drafted based on direction provided to staff by the City Council in December. And so to conclude, staff supports the project because it's consistent with that December direction that you provided to us. It meets the required findings for approval and complies with the general plan, zoning, and state law. And so staff is recommending that by simple motion, you adopt the ISM&D for the project, and then also introduce an ordinance amending the sign ordinance and also the Vacaville Gateways Master Plan as shown in Exhibits B and C to the ordinance. And so that concludes staff's presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. And this is one of those that there's a lot of work that's been done behind the scenes and a lot of public outreach. And there's likely a lot of feelings towards this, and that's why even having the Gateway Master Plan is a historical document in its intent to not only beautify the freeways, eliminate signs. So this is a change in policy if we adopt it tonight. Councilmember Wiley.
You know, it is so important to get public comment, and there are people that are really strong on both sides of this issue. But when I was looking at some of on the report, on some of the feed meetings, there were like only 2 or 3 people that attended the Zoom meeting. So that's not really a clear feeling of how everybody felt. But on some of them, it said that there was supposed to be a online poll available, but it wasn't always available. So do you have any information on that, or like why wasn't it available, or how long was it available?
Yeah, so the initial online poll that was available in December, it was available for a much shorter period of time because we were not expecting such low attendance at the community and stakeholder meetings. But we did receive about 200 responses to that poll. The responses, Yes, prior to its closure. And that was those 200 responses were available to City Council in December at that meeting. We did hold a second online poll during that public review period for the proposed zoning text amendments. And we did receive, I forget the exact number, but it was not 200. But we did receive feedback through that poll as well.
Why did it stop? I mean, if we got 200 responses, why wasn't it open for the whole period? Because it seemed like people were wanting to respond. Was there a problem with it if it wasn't working or what?
The initial poll that was preceding the December City Council meeting was intended to provide City Council a snapshot in time based off of the initial question, should there even be efforts to talk about digital billboards? Should City Council even go through this process? The second poll, the reason why that was closed was because that was specifically identified at the question, should we go down the pathway? The second poll was opened up based off of the actual draft ordinance. Here's the draft ordinance. What do you think about it? Do you have any questions about it? And that window for that survey was based off of the totality of the information that was available to the public.
I guess my question, though, was that the first one, did it say it would be open through March and that's why people might think they had more time? Or did it never say that? Or was that just the second one that was going to be open through March?
The one in December identified the window that it would close in December.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Stockton.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I watched the Planning Commission meeting. There were lots of comments, a variety of different options that were put out there. And going through the packet, there were some additional options that you had in the packet. I don't know why they're not in the presentation. One of which included signs going further down Interstate 80 and stopping at Alamo Drive, where they were separated by 4,500 feet. I'm wondering if you're able to pull that up so council can take a look at that and discuss maybe if that might separate these things and not consolidate them all in one area and spread them out over a greater distance, but not on top of each other, even at 3,000 feet.
We do have the figure that identifies what it would look like plotted throughout the entire city. That was an exercise that was the result of the Planning Commission's study session, and that produced this piece of information that's on the screen right here.
Right, that's at 1,500 feet, right? You have one at 4,500 feet? I believe it was in there. That went the distance.
Not the entirety of the city.
That was in the packet, correct?
So the only 4,500 feet exhibit that was also included in the packet is this one right here. That's
okay, so was the other one that went the full distance that wasn't 1,500 feet, was that 3,000 feet? I remember seeing, I believe I saw one that was.
So there were 4 scenarios that were evaluated based on that Planning Commission request.
Okay.
There's the 1,500 feet. There's the 1,500 feet. There's 1,500 feet, right, including Interstate 80.
We don't have one that's the 4,500 or 3,000 or 4,500 feet that goes the distance down 80 from.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so how many signs would be if it went down Interstate 80, continuing on from those 5, how many signs would it be that went down 80 at the 3,000?
We don't know.
Don't know. I like them spread out, but I also listened to comments where there were discussions about additional businesses throughout the 80 corridor that would have opportunities to advertise, not necessarily consolidated, every 1,500 feet, which looks crazy up there, but also, even beyond this 3,000 square foot, or excuse me, 3,000 feet separation.
Point of helpful information for the council. Many of the existing businesses that are along the corridor do have advertisement provided through freeway signs. Not digital displays that do move, but through static signs that might be channel letters. So just for the point of clarification, there is advertisement that is provided for those existing commercial businesses.
It's not digital.
It's not digital. It's not to the scale of those sizes of digital billboards, but there is sections within the code that already allow them to, depending on the size of the commercial center, build new freeway signs, and depending on the smaller sizes, potentially ask for exceptions to get freeway signs, but they wouldn't be these larger billboard signs that are 1,200 square feet, is it? 1,200 square feet in sign area. It's more around the 200 to 300 square foot in sign area. That would be for freeway signs.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate all the information and work that went into this. And I know there's a lot of different differentiating opinions on what we should do with these signs. With the Gateway Master Plan, how is it addressed for the southwest entrance into the Alamo Merchant area? Because I did see the letter from Andy's representing Mr. Moreno for proposed sign at the Alamo Merchant exit right there on 80. But I didn't see anything on the plan for going that entrance into Vacaville. I know it probably needs some exceptions. I unfortunately didn't get a chance to talk to Mr. Moreno beforehand about what his full plan was. But I do know there's a blighted area within that section that hopefully the sign might offset fixing some of that blight in the area, which has been a headache of mine since, long before I even got on council. So maybe during public comment, we can have a chance to hear from him regarding the letter that came in that we're looking at. But is there going to be something that address that corridor or that entrance into Vacaville?
No further analysis beyond the two initial areas that council gave direction on back in December has been done. And that was largely because we were following council's direction.
Yeah.
Councilmember Silva, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Open up to the public and anyone who wants to come forward on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to council. 3 items. One is maybe I missed the announcement of the survey. Was that published through the Planning Commission announcements and I missed it? That's one question. A comment. When you drive to Reno, you're bombarded, you're blasted. In fact, you can't even read all of the billboards. There's so bloody many of them, and it really cheapens the place. It's like Sodom and Gomorrah already, and now you have all those bloody signs. And I know that this council will not allow that to happen, but few is more. Then another comment is that I hope private property rights are really a big deal, and other than an extreme emergency such as evacuation route, I really object to the city making any public service announcements willy-nilly on the billboard owner's property. That they have it there as a business, and it's not up to the city or any other government agency to seize their property and use it for their own situation or desires. I don't think that serves the best interest of the community, other than a dire emergency, like I said, pointing to an evacuation route. But anything else up there, I ask the council, please don't do that. We get into the habit of that, of taking private property for public use. It's not a good path. Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening. So there was a lot of outreach. Fortunately, I've been working a lot the last couple of years, so I just didn't make any of the meetings. And I know my questions might be too little too late, but I have a couple questions. So it seems like there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of signs. And I was just wondering, what's the mitigation to prevent people who are driving who have a lot of light sensitivity, where it could trigger a seizure or a migraine? And I heard there's no movement, but if you could just go down the list of what could mitigate a seizure and a migraine caused by so many lights, because it looks like, again, the opportunity is a lot of illumination along our thoroughfare. I think signs, they could be used as an opportunity to promote the city's strategy. What does Vacaville mean to people? You don't want to just attract just because of the business. You want to attract people to live here. We have this biotech initiative. How does this signage kind of go with selling Vacaville to the public? I don't know. if you look at just Solano County in general, when you, one of the signs you see at the gateway of Solano County, it's a billboard that says Israel kills 3 school buses of kids daily. Our taxes fund it. Even though the county has nothing to do with that billboard, it sends a message. I mean, if I didn't already live here and I saw that billboard, I'd be like, oh my God, I don't want to live in Solano County. This is crazy. So I'm hearing that we have no control over the content, but is that really true? I mean, can you have a sign that's so distracting that someone could interpret it as hate? Could that really happen? And now it's going to be illuminated in digital lights? Because this is a billboard, there's no, it's not digital yet, but how can we address that kind of concern? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Council. Andy Goodman, representing Kevin Moreno and Ren Cafe, Nut Tree, and various other property owners. I think that staff did a wonderful job. They spent a lot of time. 280 pages worth of staff report and analysis is quite extensive. So we appreciate all their help, and we appreciate them supporting the Nut Tree as they move through writing this process. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about gateway signage. We've taken a look at various areas that allow for digital signs, being the 505 freeway up near Midway, being the I-80 up near Midway. So we've covered the north end of the city. We've covered the east end of the city. I like that the council members are addressing the idea that maybe we need a gateway sign on the far west end of the property or the city coming into the city. I believe that the merchant interchange would make a ideal area for that digital sign. That interchange is up for new upgrades at this point. It could be used for this following purposes. Public messaging, as was addressed by one of the residents in the city here. Public messaging is very important to the city, putting out various messages such as Amber Alerts, natural disasters, any type of fundraisers that are happening in the city, any type of park events, as we talked about earlier. It also provides revenue to offset the upgrades for that particular interchange. So, with the changes happening in that area, revenue does come into the city. In terms of the airport influence area, I-80 is in clearance approval, and we do support that. So we will take our projects to the Airport Commission and have them make the necessary approvals. We believe that the 505 has no process, and we just need to find areas that allow for digital billboards in that area. Obviously, we would like some contingency upon that if it's possible to get the commission to agree to at least look at various projects in that area. And then looking at the digital map, at the map that was presented to council and to the public, to me, those are the worst case scenarios. When you ask for an M&D and you look at the possible scenario of where all these digital signs are going to go, they give you a plethora of locations. That's not in real life. That doesn't take into consideration the CUP process, Caltrans, landscaping, spacing, and so forth. In terms of the illumination, one of the residents brought up signs at night are they can't be brighter than 0.3 foot candles above ambient light. So there are controls on them that keep the lighting down on the signs. And we can go through that at a later time in terms of the tests we do, the public service. And lastly, I think that offensive type advertising is not what we're looking at doing. We're not.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Go ahead and bring it back to the council. I can appreciate a lot of what has been said. There's a lot of different reasons to do it. I look at the Gateway Master Plan, and having been part of this for many years, even as staff, Vacaville's beautiful. We look at the hills. Gateways are, in my opinion, gateways should be really held to account for the beautifulness if you're going to drive through Vacaville, if you're going to drive through Lagoon Valley. I also look, and I've seen the project, and right at an off-ramp where there's an overpass, I look at safety. I look at, there's residential right there, which was the reason why in December, I wanted to make sure there was nothing near the residential areas up off of 505, and to be as far away as that as possible, but still trying to find, what is a compromise in 2024 versus what it looked like 20 years ago. I'm not in favor of moving anything farther to the west than the north areas of 505 or anything farther west of the northeast corridor. Certainly, as I said in December, I'm not in favor of anything near the 505 point. These are gateway locations that aesthetically need to be kept pristine in my view. It's not a personal thing. It's simply just how I view things. Aesthetics are important, and when we look at design standards, we're wanting something that is nice, but we could also take advantage of what benefits can be there. I think it's important to understand that a monument sign or a freeway sign is much different than a billboard. And for that reason, I'm willing to support this even at the 3,000 foot mark as far as a radius. My preference would be even higher, but I do believe that given where the airport is and also where it's restricted, it has the ability to enhance our freeways with funding that can come to the city for the purposes of beautification. And for that reason, I am willing to support what is recommended by staff tonight. Councilmember Stockton.
Thank you again for the presentation and the comments. I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, on almost all of it, because I do think that we need to be very careful and we need to be very calculated to make sure that this doesn't become the Vegas Strip, I think is what the Planning Commission, it came up, and that we don't have craziness everywhere. But I think there's balance somewhere. I think that we have some opportunity to maybe try some things beyond what you mentioned. And one of the things that came up that you've lived and that I live in law enforcement is the importance of amber alerts, silver alerts, all these different ways to communicate with people when seconds matter. And so I would like to see maybe at least one or two, closer to 80, depending upon which side somebody's driving on the freeway. We might be able to put out vital information. I think that that might save somebody's life. I do think it needs to be done respectfully and carefully, and that it needs to take into account just the beauty that we want to see in our city, right? I think that when we look at the freeway beautification commitment that the council made in taking over the maintenance of the on-ramps and off-ramps from Caltrans, I think that that is a step in the right direction. And I think that if in any of these signs, whether they're in the areas that I think we agree upon and the one or two that maybe go down 80 or start at Alamo and work their way down, I think that they should have some design features that absolutely blend into those on-ramps and off-ramps and go toward beautifying the area and not overwhelming it in a way that is distasteful. So I would agree with you. I like the signs being on the west side of 505. I do like the 3,000 recommendation that staff made, but I do think that one or two along Interstate 80 would be okay. I think that we should see maybe those plans specifically in more detail before we allow them. Do we have the option to allow someone interested in putting a sign on the 80 corridor in that section that's not on the, that wasn't in the presentation today, to bring forward a project and that we could approve at a later time?
The short answer is no, and the reason is because the ordinance is drafted specifically for those two locations, but included with City Council recommendation, the list of alternatives. There's opportunities for modifications, and I see Director Morris has come up to help provide additional clarification.
Sorry, thank you, Councilmember Stockton and Council. This whole policy and ordinance development process initiated because one billboard operator wanted to do one freeway digital billboard. So if the council were to adopt the ordinance and guidelines update, which would be implementing council direction given to staff in December that limits it to the 505 and 80 corridor near the Northeast Growth Area, nothing precludes another billboard operator or prospective billboard developer from doing what Clear, paying the fees and asking the council to initiate a subsequent zoning code text amendment to allow digital billboard uses. I feel that there's a correspondence from Clear Channel today that didn't quite hit this point. I had a lot of conversations with them, and one of their chief frustrations, and I definitely don't work for them, but working with them, is that they paid a lot of money to initiate this process, particularly for their interests, and they understand and they've expressed frustration that everyone wants to broaden it out and allow lots of other things. But when Stockton, if another billboard operator wants to pursue this, they could go through that same process. Did.
Or we could handle it today. Correct.
We haven't done the sequence for locations outside of the area that was directed by council. I think it could just be added today. I think it would require an analysis by staff.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yeah, kind of to echo what Councilmember Stockton said. Yeah, there are benefits of looking at that western side of the city, although to me it's like the lesser don't necessarily want digital signage there, but I also really dislike them even more. So if that would do a gateway corridor there, and some smaller digital signs, a full giant one or 65 foot high, from a conversation with Mr. Goodwin there, that they still need to do all the feasibilities there, because I know with on-ramp, it limits a lot of visibility from east to west travel. And then also across freeway, then there's also a complex right on the other side of it, so there is residential there. And I do understand, but yeah, it's like, do I improve entrance from inside of Vacaville, which is, yeah, very blight on kids, or having a digital billboard offset and clean up that entire. So that is kind of a mix. And then if I'm Director Morris correctly, that even if we pass this, we can still submit an application through the whole process, even if we do pay, correct? Yeah. Thank you.
Councilmember.
For clarification, is this going to, we're going to talk about the fee, and the second one, Director Morris was just, or is one take care of, if we have first action, to take care of the conversion initially required?
An application would, if City Council decides to pass this ordinance, then we'll be able to continue the process now that it would through the code to obtain a conditional use permit interview. That will be brought back to the city on a future date, being able to work with the applicant from compliance with all of the standards be adopted by City Council.
And saying that based on a lot of, from a lot of residents, I think digital boards speak to the city. It's to, here's another billboard and another one. So I see the connection, how putting these up enhances the way of the city, other than if it gives us, resources to work on the landscape, maybe we can find ways to get resources to landscaping. Big cost, what we see every face for revenue to do landscaping. So if there's others that I don't, let me know what they are.
Well, it was to the billboards. Development that allow for some cost to come to this, and the council gives that says, let's use it to build some of our on-ramps. And so when you drive through that, we've all driven, you go, that looks, and you drive through another one, it looks nice. How about that? And placement important for things look. And to you in just a second, Silva. So with you, Councilmember Wiley, the gateway, when you Vacaville, there's something about the hills. In the wintertime, they're green, they're brown in the summer. But that's what you see down the free, looking around. There are times
Councilmember Silva, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Returning to the council, the next time before you is resolution approving consumer price index adjustment to the city's service facility rental fees. And that's me, Finance Director, who's here with the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening again. This next item is a brief presentation regarding annual updates to the city's service and facility fee schedule for the upcoming fiscal year. Starting with some background, service and facility rental fee schedule is typically brought to council every 4 years for approval to apply annual CPI adjustments to keep pace with the cost of service delivery and facility maintenance. This item was last presented to council on June 27, 2023. At that time, we only requested a CPI adjustment for 1 year because an external fee study was underway. The request was consistent with our past practice of applying the San Francisco Oakland Hayward CPI, which was 3.6% at that time. The fee schedule is a list of fees that recover all or part of the cost of providing services and maintaining the city's rental facilities. Examples include construction permits for community development, fire and police services, as well as facility rentals. The CPI adjustment would not apply to utility rates, business license fees, or taxes that are not part of this schedule. Changes to taxes and utilities are subject to alternative costs that typically includes voter approval. In addition to the CPI adjustment being proposed, the proposed fee schedule for the upcoming fiscal year includes adjusting Parks and Rec fees to align the fee schedule to currently available services and facilities. These include changes in the fees for 2 locations: the Atlantis Cultural Center and Gardens, which appears on page 20 and 21 of the fee schedule, and the Vacaville Performing Arts Theater, also known as BPAC, which appears on page 31. The Atlantis fees are being established for the conference room and garden arch, and parking lot fees are being removed pending further study. The fees for BPAC have been adjusted for formatting and to improve readability. The fees are being established for newly built services and equipment. So this slide, I will look at each one of these. These are the proposed fees for BPAC, and these fees are being made available for the new services and equipment. They're going to be available to the public and keep BPAC competitive with other nearby theaters. The recommendation for this evening is to apply the most recent CPI adjustment, which is 4% as of April 2024 to the upcoming fiscal year, and adjust the Parks and Rec fees to align with available services and equipment. Approve the changes would go into effect on July 1st of 2024. And we're not requesting a CPI adjustment for subsequent fiscal years since we are still working on that external fee study, and once it's completed, we'll be bringing it back to council for discussion. That's this presentation.
Thank you. I don't see any questions in the open to the public. Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Councilman Silva, do you have any comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion? Motion and second, roll call. Yes.
Councilmember Studa? Councilmember Chapman?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts? Councilmember Blindley? Mayor Connolly?
Yes. And I'm not sure Silva was trying to say something.
Councilmember Silva?
Hey, my connection's even worse.
Yes or no?
We can hear you. Are you yes or no?
My connection's worse. I have to abstain from this one.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right, what do we have next?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next item is our consolidated annual action plan. Ken McCollum from our Housing and Community Services Department is here with the presentation.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
All right. All right. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. Tonight, I'm here to present the Community Development Block Grant Program Year 24-25 Annual Action Plan. This plan aims to address the priority needs in the community, ensure effective utilization of funds allocated to us. The Community Development Block Grant Entitlement Program, or CDBG program, is federally funded. Grants to cities and counties with the goal of developing viable urban communities and providing decent housing and expanding economic opportunities. Since 1988, the city of Vacaville has been an entitlement city receiving CDBG funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. The primary focus is to benefit low and moderate income individuals or those earning 80% or less of area median income. The CDBG funds allocated to us locally or used to address priority needs identified in the City Council's 5-year consolidated plan. The City of Vacaville receives approximately $500,000 a year and adheres to the statutory requirements to utilize CDBG funds for eligible activities and projects in accordance with our adopted 5-year consolidated plan. For the program year for 2024 through 2025, not that long ago, we have an annual funding allocation of $532,369. We are also proposing to include prior year unspent funding of $54,612 $54,612.40 for total allocation of $586,981.40. The allowable 20% allocation, which amounts to a little over $106,000, is planned to be dedicated towards planning and administrative work. Then there's an allowable 15% of the annual allocation, totaling $79,855.35. That will be allocated towards public services focused on youth development. That's split, as you see on the screen, between Vacaville Neighborhood Boys and Girls Club and the Levin. And we are proposing the remaining funding be allocated towards the Brown Street Park, totaling a little over $400,000. Staff understands that the Brown Street Park is still being considered by council under a Measure M consideration. So if the council's priorities change at a future meeting or a future decision, that funding can be reallocated and staff can work to identify another eligible activity, and that would come back to council at a future time. The draft 24-25 annual action plan was made available to the public for review and comment. And we have followed HUD's process to provide the required 30-day comment period by publishing the notices in the Vacaville Reporter in both Spanish and English, as well as in addition, the action plan was made available on the city's website and emailed to agencies included in the plan, as well as other community partners. Several changes to the initial draft plan have been made since first published, and so that has been added to the website with track changes for the public to review. Tonight, we are asking council to accept public comment and provide comment. And if approved, all comments will be incorporated into the plan and will be submitted to HUD no later than July 6th as required. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions from council or the public.
Thank you for the presentation. Councilmember Stockton.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. How did you come up with the figures for the allocations for the two different kids after school programs?
In the consolidated plan that was approved by council for the 2020 period through 2024, the Vacaville Boys and Girls Club and Levin were identified as the organizations that the council wanted to target for youth services. The $5,000 is a standing figure for the Levin, and the remainder generally has gone to Vacaville Boys and Girls Club. Their total together is 15% of the annual allocation that is allowed to go towards public services.
Hello. There we go. So if the Brown Street Park does not happen, that money cannot be allocated to either of those programs because it would exceed the 15%. Is that my understanding?
Correct.
I guess I'm just concerned at the disparity between the two. I recognize that both of them provide extensive but unique services to different kids. I think they both should be supported. I'm just not quite sure why it's so offset one-sidedly. And I know that we had that before, but when would that be looked at again? Would now be the time, or would it be later?
So this year, staff will be starting the consolidated planning process for the next consolidated planning period that would actually start with the July 1, 2025 fiscal year. So staff will be coming back through various times throughout this upcoming fiscal year and conducting public outreach to get input towards the next 5-year consolidated plan.
And that would include these two groups, correct?
That would include the priorities that the council would like to set for the city and where they would like to see that funding going. So it would take into account where council would like to set the public service priorities.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Wiley?
Thank you for the information. You followed all the rules about posting in the newspaper and all that and the 30-day comment period. So did you get many comments during that 30-day comment period?
No, we had, as of tonight, we have not received any comment from the public. In addition to publishing in the paper and on the website, we also email it out to organizations that are either included in the plan or have an interest in the plan. So for an example, we also include legal aid services to see if there's any input that they would like to make on the plan. We directly email that out, and we also have gone out into the community and posted it at various locations throughout the city. And those locations are listed in the annual action plan as well as in our citizen participation plan.
All right, well, this sounds like you've covered a lot of bases. It's just kind of disappointing when we don't get a lot of public comment, but thank you for your work eliciting it.
Yeah, thank you. And open it up to the public for any comment. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council. Councilmember Silva, are you on the line? Do you have any comments?
Yes. No, none at this time.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion is Silva motions and Stockton seconds. Roll call.
Councilmember Wiley, Vice Mayor Ritchie, Councilmember Stockton, Councilmember Silva,
Yes.
Chapman, Councilmember Roberts, Mayor Clark.
Yes. So at this time, we have one final presentation tonight, and I will be excusing myself and turning this council meeting over to Vice Mayor Ritchie. And the microphones are down, so whatever you want to do. Have to hold it, I know. Whoever needs to use the mic is going to have to use the mic. The system's down. One item left.
You can scoot closer if you want the mic.
Yeah, it would help. That's mics. Roy? Should I need to keep past the agenda? Okay, so the next step, you guys, you're up.
Thank you, Council. I'm your closer for tonight. The item before you is the 2024 Annual Land Use and Development Code update. This project is divided into 3 parts: minor and administrative text amendments for the 2023-2031 Housing Element Program, and then a part 3, which is administrative text amendments to address an outstanding condition of approval that was placed on the city by the Airport Land Use Commission. Some background outlining how we got to this point. Notable components for this is February 2022, we did a comprehensive update to the Vacaville Municipal Code, and that code became effective in July of 2022. And then we did our first annual update last year in June, and concurrent with that was the housing element that was also adopted that necessitated a lot of the stuff that we're going to be amending and talking about tonight. Part 1 involves a lot of textual changes that we're making to our code. These are minor administrative changes. There are 2 components I wanted to draw to City Council's attention as part of this. The first is we're changing our text that if anybody is requesting a amendment to our zoning text, that it requires City Council's approval prior to them being able to submit a formal application. That would help in the scenarios where like Clear Channel comes in and they want to make a change, they have to bring that before City Council in any case when it's amending our zoning text. The other thing I want to draw attention to is that we have, or that as part of this amendment, we're adding new objective standards for multifamily development, specifically when they're located next to single-family homes within those existing established neighborhoods. So as part of that packet, we've identified a number of provisions within there that are intended to help create more compatibility between those scenarios. Some more of other zoning textual amendments that we're doing, also addressing some inconsistencies that are identified within the code down there at the bottom of the slide. Part 2 is identified in our housing element. It's necessitated by our housing element that was adopted last year. And a lot of these I would describe as updating to be consistent with what state law requires, and then addressing compliance with housing element programs. Now, a lot of these have due dates of December of this year, so we're getting a lot of them done early this year. And a lot more. So it's really just about adding more definitions and adding a lot more different land uses such as supportive housing and employee housing that were required by our housing element. And this describes some more of those amendments that we're doing. We're also revising our code to look specifically at objective findings, this time looking at conditional use permits and adjustments, those specific entitlements. And then part 3 is addressing a condition of approval that was placed on the city related to the housing element. And we went back to the Airport Land Use Commission in June of this year, and the proposed text amendment that we're making to our code, the Airport Land Use Commission determined that would be consistent with what their original direction was. And so there at the bottom, any text amendment, the text amendment is specific to any project that's located within Zone C, any new construction or modification to lighting, landscaping, or parking lots that are in Zone A, that's adjacent to the runway of the Metro Airport, or within the northern portion of Zone C, that's the business park that's vacant land now. It's located along North Village Parkway, and I believe it's Falcon Road. So any projects that are being proposed in those areas would need to go back to the Airport Land Use Commission before they proceed down their entitlement pathway. We held some public hearings for this particular zoning text amendment. Solano County Airport Land Use Commission, the public hearing was on April 11th. They voted unanimously for the comprehensive amendments, determined that they were consistent with both compatibility plans. And then we also went to the Planning Commission on May 21st. Some commissioners expressed concern that the new multifamily objective standards would discourage development. At the end of the night, the commission voted 6-1 to recommend that City Council approve the comprehensive changes that we're proposing tonight. We did hold some public outreach for this project, a stakeholder meeting in March, as well as a community meeting in April, and then did a newspaper publication for the May Planning Commission meeting, as well as City Council meeting for tonight. So in conclusion, we found that the proposed amendments that are being recommended for tonight are consistent with the general plan and zoning ordinance. They're rectifying some inconsistencies and inaccuracies that we are continuing to find from year to year. They are reducing in volume. It addresses council's concerns with objective standards for multifamily residential development, specifically next to single-family development. And also, this is the big one, is we're implementing many housing element programs within a required time frame. So with that, we have a couple of recommendations for City Council to adopt the subject resolution and also introduce the ordinance. That's it in my presentation. I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you for presentation. Oh, thank you for presentation. There you go. That's right. That's for Jason.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. What was the issue that the planning commissioner had with the multifamily housing, the objection to that? Why they thought it would decrease or limit development?
It's probably related to that the additional standards will put developers in a situation where they would have to redesign or design their project to meet certain needs adjoining single-family homes. So for instance, there is additional requirements for installing masonry walls along frontages that might be across the street from single-family homes or that share the same property line as single-family homes. So that's added cost onto the developer that they have to build that additional wall. Another standard that you'll find that we're recommending is that above the first floor, you have to have a 5-foot setback. Above the second floor, another 5-foot setback, and that presents some architectural challenges for the developer. And so those are a couple of examples that would present challenges for the development community while they're trying to develop a multifamily project. Again, this is when it's located next to single-family homes or across the street from single-family homes.
So like they pointed out, that primarily affect like a lot of infill sites that we have, like if we're trying to develop into old shopping centers or community centers that are directly next to, single family home developments like single story buildings.
Correct. Yeah, these standards would likely be applicable to a lot of those infill sites.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for this information. One of the pieces of information, there was a lot of things regarding accessory dwelling units and trying to make that more straightforward. So right across the street from me, they just did one, and it's very tasteful. It looks great. But I think they said it was about 2 years from beginning to end, starting the permits and all that. And then they had, someone come in and do the whole thing because it wasn't just, buy the pre-made thing. So I guess, are we trying to streamline permits whenever possible is my first question. And then you said that some of this addresses and adds objective standards, which is what we've asked for. Do you see that there's quite a bit more room to add objective standards, or do you think we've addressed objective standards in many of the places that we need to?
The first question is yes, we're always looking for ways to streamline methods. And for accessory dwelling units, a lot of those are allowed through just ministerial over-the-counter kind of permits that are processed through our building division. So sometimes there might be financing, finding a general contractor to build those that can elongate that period. But in our department, we try to make sure that that period of time is very shortened so that way they can get on to building their project. The multifamily objective standards are addressing a particular issue that was presented by council, that was identified by council for apartment development. Back in February 2022, when we did a comprehensive amendment to our land use and development code, a lot of that did take care of objective standards. Our goal through every single year is to try and find ways to improve the code to make it more objective. So for now, what we've identified as being the most crucial amendment is addressing multifamily development when in close proximity, because we found that it wasn't very clear. We have objective standards for multifamily in general, but we don't have it explicitly for when you're abutting or across the street from single family development. It's our intent that throughout the years, we might find more areas to improve on the code. And that's why we're coming back to City Council from year to year. Is there other ways that we can improve it?
And so the objective standards, you just as a group thought this is what we need and this sounds good? Or, did you have any other groups look at objective standards from other places, or not? A lot of other people don't have them as well. So I guess my question is, how did you derive the best objective standard?
For multifamily, yes, we did look at a number of other municipalities to see what are they looking at. We did look at previous iterations of our own code to see what were some good things that we could steal from. So yeah, we used a number of different methods to derive from that code. It's not just one individual that's going through a think tank of trying to figure this stuff out. We're using a lot of different pieces of information.
Thank you. I hope it will help us next time.
All right, thank you so much. Any other comments from the council? Nope. Okay. Now open to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'll step up here.
Yeah. I think it's just on the microphone. Yeah. hold on.
Here's this one.
I think so.
Thank you. Okay, just a couple of observations and comments. One is, what would be the impact when, as you know, I was rather alarmed when an individual wanted to change an exception to the city's policy on Vine Street, and that, in my opinion, would definitely require a new environmental impact because you're changing the complexion of the terrain and then how it might impact Markham. The second is the city of San Jose is now allowing, I don't know how they title it, but they're now allowing auxiliary dwelling units to be sold as an individual property. And that might trigger, should that trigger, I think it should trigger an environmental impact, because now you're now creating a whole new property. And I don't know that the city of Vacaville will do it, but as these workarounds occur, I would hope that the city would look at the impact both in traffic flows and things, and then we're trying to change up this stuff. I don't want to see too many. I don't want to open a door that can be easily manipulated for an individual or an entirely new class of property. Like I said, San Jose selling ADUs as an individual. I don't even know how they title it. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, you can hear me okay. Hi, great. All right, I apologize. I didn't have time to read the whole staff report, but I have a couple questions. So just thinking of my experience with the Southtown proposed apartment project, which is multifamily, it had an EIR that was 18 plus years old. So how does this, okay, what's happening now? How does this prevent, I mean, a situation? Can an existing development, say something that's subject to a development agreement right now, if that developer came forward and said, well, you know what, we want to change the master plan to include X or whatever, has there been anything with regard to any change now that would allow them to do that particular change without having a new environmental impact report? Could they rely on what you're doing now? Does that make sense? So you're referencing the 2015 general plan EIR. I'm assuming that includes all the approved developments that were subject to a development agreement. And then, so say the North Village that's subject to an old development agreement, what if they came forward with a new change? Would it just be assessed at that time on whether or not a new EIR has to be done? Or has the general plan EIR been amended to basically accommodate any kind of projected changes that you kind of anticipate in some of these existing development agreements? I believe that makes sense. And then lastly, I'm hearing about objective standards, and if you could just define objective standards, because with the Southtown, I know we were worried about parking, but that wasn't considered an objective standard, I think. And there's objective standards that are design standards, and I think there's different standards, and I'm not sure which ones you guys are talking about. Thank you.
Can you guys answer those questions for her?
Yes, I'm sorry, just taking notes.
Yeah, sorry. Close public comment.
All right, so the first question was related to the project that was over on Vine Street and whether or not those particular changes would need to come back before City Council. In the situation with Vine Street, when there is a policy within our general plan and somebody is requesting an amendment, that would be a general plan amendment and would need to come back to City Council prior to them being able to move through that process. There was a question about whether or not you can actually sell ADUs. I don't know that answer to that question. I can tell you that the amendments that are occurring for our ADU section within our zoning ordinance is intended to be holistically compliant with state law, so that way it protects the city. The question that was asked about modifying existing EIRs or whether or not EIRs would need separate analysis for a change. I might provide an example of a specific plan that had an environmental impact report that had been adopted for it, such as the farm at Alamo Creek. You can put modifications into two different categories. Minor modifications where you're maybe changing lot patterns very subtly to be able to accommodate different types of houses. Those are minor. Those are something that might be handled by staff level review. You might also get a major modification where you're changing single family homes to apartments. That would be a modification that has to go before the original decision maker. And in that particular case, that's already built into our code already. The original decision maker for instance, the farm at Alamo Creek was the city council. So major changes to land uses would need to go back to the original decision maker for changes like that. The question about whether or not environmental analysis would be considered, has the general plan EIR been modified holistically to consider all of these infill sites? The answer is no. Any infill site that would be looked at as part of some subsequent project, they would have to be independently evaluated for their project-specific impact on the environment. Whether or not that would be covered by a categorical exemption that doesn't need environmental review because maybe we have all the existing resources, or maybe they do produce an impact that needs to be disclosed as part of that development review process. Those are things that we don't know about individual sites. We know that at least these amendments were already covered by previous analysis, mainly identified through the addendum that was done for the housing element. There was an analysis that showed for all the programs that were done for that, and then all the other smaller text amendments to make our code more efficient was covered by the original general plan EIR. And then the last question was about the difference between objective standards and subjective standards. So in the instance of parking, those parking standards are objective because it's a calculation that's based off of the number of units and the type of units. So single family home requires 2 parking spaces. That's an easy calculation when you're looking at a subdivision that's looking at building out X number of homes. Subjective calculations, subjective standards might be that the building has to be compatible with adjoining uses. And how does that compatibility work? It's a very subjective thing. So the way that we've designed the code is, in order to be compatible with adjoining single-family homes, this multifamily project must be built with A, B, and C. And those A, B, and C's are masonry walls adjoining single-family homes or across the street from single-family homes. Your second stories have to be pushed back. Absolutely no 3-story buildings directly across the street or directly abutting single-family homes. Those would be precise objective standards that can be measured through that development review process. And if they don't meet those standards, then it doesn't meet the findings. And I believe that concludes the questions that were asked.
Thank you so much. Any questions?
So if we determine that we need to adapt these, add some, subtract some, we'll be able to do that how often?
Our current goal right now is to revisit our code every year, get in the good practices of maybe as we're going through different projects, realizing what things did work, what things don't work, but it's on an annual basis. And this is the second year we've repeated it.
Okay.
I also want to say thank you very much for adding the part about balconies being added to like the second story, because that came up, I believe, in District 6. And so because of the issue, then it's added in there. So the big issue is we need homeowners to know before they make modifications to their home, they need to find out whether or not it needs to be a permitted change. So it just, all we can do is to let people know. If they call the office, they can talk with someone and find out, because sometimes it's hard to find it all online. But if someone calls you and says, I need to know, you would be happy to explain that to them. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Because it'd be easier to do it then than have to tear down a balcony that you've already put in. All right, thank you very much for the balcony part.
All right, let's do that. Okay, so now we need a simple motion. Oh, sorry, Silva, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Can I make one quick comment if you guys can hear me clear?
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay, so shout out to staff. These past 2 years, us as a council, us as a community, have thrown a lot out at you guys during a time when the state's making a lot of new regulations and having to navigate through all that a big challenge. So I just want to express my appreciation to everybody on staff trying to navigate through all of this, how we build what we want, and how do we make sure that the quality of life is there for all development. I think my connection is dropping out again.
Thank you, Silva. Well, I have a quick comment. One of the comments in regards to the ADUs, that is the Wild West in a new territory. I really appreciate Alicia. I'm in the industry and I still don't know how it's going to work out. California has a lot of good ideas and crazy and bad ones. It does open up the opportunity for developers and people to buy houses and have the ill intention to form homeowner associations, and who's going to monitor them, sell the ADUs as individual condos. I think it's going to be a really hard thing California is trying to do to solve the housing crisis, but who's going to monitor it? So I see your concern. I don't know how it's going to work out, especially if you buy a house and intend to sell deed-restricted or a certain person, you do a workaround, and I think it can create more problems than solutions. So I'm with you on that. I'm watching it as a person in the industry. I don't know how it's going to work out, but looking for a motion. Oh, sorry. Roy, sorry. And Sarah, second. And roll call, please.
Councilmember Stockton? Councilmember Silva?
Yes.
Member Chapman? Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley? Yes. Vice Mayor Ritchie?
Here we go. Now it reports to City Manager. Here. You are right. Reports to City Council. Well, almost 9:15. All right.
I'll say one thing.
Okay.
I know there were a lot of special events. I know that there are folks that met at the park to celebrate. I know that there were Juneteenth Freedom Celebration. I went and attended the Solano Black Chamber of Commerce's event. I thought it was wonderfully put together. There was an amazing booth for the Tuskegee Airmen, and just we have named part of our freeway here in Vacaville after the Tuskegee Airmen. Very passionate people that are really kind of perpetuating the legacy of some pretty amazing individuals. So I thought that was great, in addition to just recognizing how important freedom is to everybody that lives in this great country. The other thing that I wanted to bring up was Father's Day passed, and I just wanted to thank my father. I was raised by my stepfather. He's been in my life since I was 7 months old. So I just wanted to say, Dad, I love you, and happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. I know it can be a tough time for a lot of people for a lot of reasons, but I'm fortunate and blessed to have an amazing father, and I just wanted to give him a shout out today. And my kid for making me a dad too.
I was going to hold my comments until the next council meeting, but after hearing the comment made by Councilmember Stockton about the Tuskegee Airmen, Colonel Warren was the initiator. I'm going to say he was the big initiator of having the portion of 80 named after the Tuskegee Airmen. And also, I just want to share his wife, at the age of 102, passed recently, and her services were held on Friday. She was a longtime educator here in Vacaville. And with that said, I just wanted to share that Frank Molino was the principal at Wilsey Wood High School, and he passed recently, and his services are tomorrow, I believe it is. Just wanted to acknowledge those families. My condolences to the Frank Molino family. And there was quite a bit going on during this month. And do we have a council meeting the first week in July? Okay, just just wanted to make that public.
Yeah, because we don't have another council meeting before next week. There's obviously a big holiday coming up. And so, I mean, Mr. Birdshirt definitely reminded me of that. When I looked up, I was like, oh yeah, it is before our next council meeting. Yeah, just be safe out there, be mindful of fireworks. Not everybody enjoys it being set off in their neighborhoods. We do put on a great show downtown, so I encourage everybody to go watch that. And just be safe and have fun during the holiday. It's going to be very warm next week, and make sure you hydrate because there's always people with the heat injuries coming up.
I would just also want to reiterate on the 4th of July to come to the city. Don't do it in your neighborhood because that's what we hear so many complaints. And we've seen the fire don't ignite. So please do not ignite at home. And then I just wanted to say the Pride in the Park was great last Sunday. And on Saturday, I did the Laramie Project through a local theater group. And it was also a wonderful presentation. So support local actors when we can. And on Monday, we did a park walk through that Pheasant Country Park, which we had approved the final things about a month ago. And Brian McLean was there and Nemo Gonzalez, and they met with some neighborhood people about what we're doing with the Parks and Rec and Public Works for the parks. So it was well received, and I just really appreciate all the staff that are working together to make our city best. And because it is going to be hot, watch, I guess, for cooling centers if the temperature reaches too hot, and they would be advertised on social media and other places. That's it.
Silva?
No, thank you all for bearing with me. I have a bad echo on my end, so I'll see you guys when we get back to the track.
Hello? Okay. All right, so sorry about that. I'll be really quickly. Talking about ski airmen, that's coming off of Juneteenth celebration is absolutely amazing. Here, small but mighty in the city. Couple that with back of Father's Day, it reminds me. So my great uncle was a ski airman. He inspired my dad, who was a country boy, a farmer, to get a full ride in Indiana State for the whole purpose to graduate, become a pilot in the Air Force. You graduate college, you become an officer. He flew to Vietnam as we landed here. Seeing that whole journey to the airmen to here, Juneteenth, that celebration, it was amazing what we learned. It just reminds you of a lot of stuff between the liberties we earned in that day and as going forward, celebrating, and the liberties that I saw people celebrate in the park. I wasn't there the whole time. I actually, Saturday and Sunday, went fishing with my son in Rio Vista, and it was the best feeling to be with my father, Father's Day, post-Father's Day, with my son. But the choice, and this really just comes down to choices. Going to the park, being part of the celebration for the brief part I was there. Maybe all of it wasn't for me, but allowing people to express themselves, have freedom and choice is what it's all about. It's the liberties that we're all fight for, we die for. To see people live it out was really important to me. So I really appreciate everything. Thank you. And that's it, Vacaville. Good night.
Well done, Greg. Vice Mayor, well done.